Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mindfulness Monday, June 29th. I'm so happy to be here with all of you again today. We have entered into, almost 100 days. Yes, 100 days of stay-at-home isolation. It's kind of amazing for me to wrap my head around the fact that this whole pandemic that we've been dealing with globally, this is our 100th day approximately of our stay-at-home isolation. It's amazing. And only now are we beginning to ease ourselves back out into the world very carefully, very cautiously, very mindfully, I hope. That's really what we want to see happen, is that we are easing our way back out into the world. I'm seeing, where I live here in Los Angeles, restaurants are opening up gradually, and small businesses, which I'm really happy to see because I know so many small businesses have suffered during this time. So we want to support those small businesses. Parks, I don't think parks, beaches are opening up, and hiking trails, maybe some parks have opened up, but what I'm seeing in my environment, that it's happening very gradually. So I'm happy to see that. And we have to keep in mind that COVID-19 hasn't gone away. We just need to get used to living with it for now. So, during this time in isolation, many people have had to live in close proximity with friends, family, and loved ones. And as the saying goes, sometimes too much familiarity can breed contempt. And unfortunately, that contempt, that difficulty, that friction between people can be made even worse in situations where domestic abuse or violence was already present in the home. And being stuck in isolation can exacerbate an already troubling situation, which brings me to my very special guest today, Jill Sorensen. Let me tell you a little bit about Jill. Jill is a writer, producer, entrepreneur, and women's advocate who speaks and writes about women's issues. Originally from Sweden, she came to the US to work as a fashion model with Ford models. Her experience in the fashion industry incited her to write her first comedy feature film, Marmalade, about the objectified life of a fashion model facing old age at 29 and hence being put out to pasture. It was selected Best Pick of the festival by the Hollywood Reporter at Cine Vegas Film Festival and won Best Picture in the California Film Festival. In 1993, Jill co-founded Knockout Abuse, one of the largest not-for-profit organizations in Washington, DC, helping women and children who are victims of domestic violence. Now also in Los Angeles, Knockout Abuse West raises awareness and funds for victims and improves living spaces for survivors. Jill is responsible for writing and creating all the organization's live events, series, videos, and awareness campaigns. Currently, Jill is developing and writing Platform Calamity J and has created the new feminist podcast, which is premiering this summer. Jill is also the owner of a home decor brand and shares her interior design expertise on her design blog, Live Like You, helping people live better lives. Jill also wrote a daily design blog for Skåne Hem, Sweden's biggest shelter magazine. Welcome, Jill, to Mindfulness Monday.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, it's so great to see you and have you here with me today. I'm so excited to talk to you.
I'm excited to talk to you.
I know we really actually haven't had a chance to do that. I mean, I went to your amazing event that you had at your home, which was so great, and it really raised my awareness about the call to action around domestic violence. So I know how much great work you're doing with Knockout Abuse, and I want to let the viewers and the listeners become more familiar with this very important organization that you created. I want to begin with what I think which is that we've all been aware, for the most part, I should say, of domestic violence. I would say, though, probably for most people peripherally, meaning if we haven't experienced domestic violence firsthand or don't know somebody who's experienced domestic violence, it's something that's usually like sort of in the background. You hear about it, but it's not something that's in the foreground of our lives unless it's personal to our own experience or we know someone that is, a victim of domestic violence. But when I looked at the statistics of domestic violence, I was shocked.
1 in 3 women. Yeah.
Unbelievable. And that's just here in the United States. So, you probably know more of the statistics than I do, but what I want to, really inform the listeners is that, let me just read one of the statistics according to the National Statistics Domestic Violence Fact Sheet. Okay, now this might be updated minute by minute for all I know. On average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. So I don't know what's going on in the rest of the world. During 1 year, this equates to more than 10 million women and men. That's extremely disturbing. And to add to that, and I'm not, bringing in the children statistic, but 1 in 15 children are exposed to intimate partner violence each year, and 90% of these children are eyewitnesses to this violence. I mean, that is just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah.
Want to know something? That's amazing. It just gave me
goosebumps. It gave me goosebumps. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like when you read a statistic like that, what's just going on in our own country, let alone what's going on in the rest of the world, which I don't think, maybe some countries are doing better, some doing worse, but we're in the United States. So I want to focus on the statistic that pertains to us, which is horrifying, So what I want to know is, how did you get involved in Knockout Abuse, and what exactly does the non-for-profit organization do to raise awareness about the urgent problem of domestic violence and help those who are victims of it?
Actually, when I hear you say that it wasn't on the forefront of, no one really kind of thinks about it, I'm thinking that's a huge issue, because every single teenage girl should be at least 13, 14 years old, be informed about this. 1 in 10 teenage girls have been abused by a partner by the age of 18.
Right. I read statistic, what is it, between 14 and 23 or 16? Again, you know the statistics better than I do. When I saw the age range of when it's crucial for the girls to be informed about this, because that's when
girls need to be informed already, I think, at almost like 12, 13 years old. Mm-hmm. So it's an epidemic, and it's not getting any better. So, but anyway, to take you back to how I got involved in it, I, in 1993, had just moved to Washington, DC, and gotten married. And my ex at the time had a big fundraiser for abused children. And he had 2,000 men go to an event where it was an all men's event, watching like prized fighting, Muhammad Ali and all kinds of, it was like an all men's event. So my friend and I thought, well, what a great opportunity to, you have 2,000 women sitting at home, or, who are not invited. And we thought, and having moved to DC, it was a very chauvinist town. I mean, it still is very much that the men come there for political reasons and the women become appendages, and even more so in the 90s. So I thought, you know what, it's time we do something to create a platform or do something to help other women. Mm-hmm. And we just started meeting with a bunch of different women's organizations to see what we wanted to help. And started reading about domestic violence, and at the time I had two friends who I had no idea. I thought they were happily married, and it turned out that they were severely abused. And within like a week span, all this information was just revealed to me, and we just decided, let's do something for domestic violence. And we started Knockout with a little dinner at Cafe Milano with 30 women, just giving $100 each, or I can't even remember, $50 each. We actually even raised money off of some people in the bar. So it was like very homemade fundraising. And from there it just grew. And now in DC, there's 2,000 people in one night that come together. So.
Wow, that is amazing. And hearing you say that about your two friends, it said that domestic and sexual violence are silent epidemics that thrive in environments of secrecy and shame, right? So how can women become better educated in knowing that secrecy and shame, just that alone, around any type of violence inflicted on them can cost them their life? Do you know what I mean? You're talking about two friends. How many women do we not know about? How many women, it's like when we think of problems, we think, oh, that's something over there. Those are other people's problems. We don't even recognize or realize how close to home that problem can be. You talk about two friends. I remember somebody coming to my home once, and she had bruises on her arms. Mm-hmm. And I instinctively and intuitively, it just didn't feel right to me. And I knew she was married at the time. And I was not afraid. I'm somebody who's not shy to speak out. And I said, what happened? And she said, oh, my husband and I, we were fooling around, and we were, tossing around. And I'm like, just didn't feel right. You know what I mean? But for me, it was a red flag.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing to know is abuse is not love. Someone calling you names or physically abusing you, verbally abusing you, financially abusing you, emotionally abusing you is not love.
Right.
So the more women, and to give you, I'm sorry, my dogs are barking. I'm keeping them out of this room.
Little time, don't worry. I have dogs too.
Yeah,
no worries.
But
that's a point. It's not love.
It is not love. And the faster you can know, if a man hits you, what you need to know is one thing is for sure, I will guarantee you, violence escalates. If he hits you, you can't say, oh, he'll never do it again, even though he was sorry, because you know what? He will do it again, and it will get worse and worse and worse. 4 women a day are murdered by their partners or husbands in this country. It will get worse. So 2 things to know: if you see a friend who's abused, let her know that violence escalates. Let her know that 4 women a day are murdered by their partner.
Right.
So the big thing is get it out of the secret. Talk about it. Women need to break the silence. Whatever secrets we have, if we share, we're so much better. Absolutely. All this darkness has no power when the truth is told.
Absolutely. There's that, saying, I won't say the exact word that's used, but I think it's something related to AA. It's like you're only as screwed up as your secrets.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? So you have nothing to gain. I know that the shame is present for a lot of people. It's said that people who are in abusive relationships will stay with their partner for a number of reasons. Some of them, which I know you're fully aware of, but I want to share with our listeners. 1, they believe their partner really is sorry and does care about them. 2, their low self-esteem leads them to believe that no one else would want to be with them. 3, it's dangerous to leave, so they are afraid to take action. 4, they feel responsible for the way their loved one acts. 5, between shared kids, pets, and finances, they feel they can't leave. Now, the number one thing that jumps out at me that I feel is at the root of the problem is low self-esteem. And that is a problem that unfortunately causes people to make terrible choices for themselves. And again, an area that women really need to look at closely about themselves. So what does knockout abuse do to help women learn how to heighten their self-esteem and feel that they deserve better for themselves?
Well, let me just start with saying that even if you don't start out with low self-esteem, abusers are very clever. No one goes on a date and starts abusing that person right away. It's a very, very slow, gradual approach that breaks down a woman's self-confidence. So, and what people also forget, this is the person that you're in love with. So you don't want, so when it's slow and gradual, you might get pushed, you might get snapped at, what we call the name, and then maybe for 6 months, nothing happens. So it's a very slow, gradual approach. So it's very tricky. People always ask, well, why don't you just leave?
Right.
My favorite quote is, it's like fighting an enemy with outposts in your head. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it starts with bad self-confidence. It starts with, it's a very gradual psychological brainwashing.
Yeah, it is. For me, it reminds me of, the areas in which being with a narcissist. I know somebody that was married, actually know a few people that have been with narcissists, and that seems to be the personality disorder.
Why are there so many male narcissists?
It's like a personality disorder du jour. It's like, oh, narcissist, that's like the flavor. Oh, that's
how many friends? Yes.
That's the flavor of the month. It's like, well, but I knew somebody who was in a very serious, not physical to my knowledge, because they could have hid it out of shame, but they were in a profoundly verbally abusive relationship with somebody that they were really in love with, the father of their children. And I saw this woman become a shell of a woman, a beautiful woman physically. She literally looked hollow. And it was only when she was given a book on narcissists, because she really, people aren't so versed in personality disorders. It's not like everybody goes, oh, I know everything about the narcissist personality. She didn't know anything, nor did she know she was married to a narcissist. Somebody gave her a book, and she came to me for a session, and she wept from the minute she opened the book to the very last page, because what it did is it validated that she was in fact married to an abusive narcissist. She couldn't identify it. She didn't know what this behavior was about. All she knew is that she was being abused, but she's divorced from this man, I might add, by now, and she's the healthiest I've ever seen her. People don't know. And it's said that a lot of narcissists, and I'm sure abusers, are extremely charming, and they can gaslight, and they can manipulate, and they can brainwash.
Yeah. No, it's an epidemic. I think it comes down to also how, the roles we play as men and women, and the roles we've played in society as men and women are assigned gender roles, and the power imbalance. Like everything in our culture really plays into not allowing women to step into their full, true power as well.
Yeah, I agree with you.
But just thinking about the secrecy and the shame factor, we actually had a woman who is a doctor, a well-known doctor in Washington, DC. She came to Knockout for 18 years, listening, because Knockout raises awareness. We have women come there and share stories. We bring it out in the open so you talk about it, because the secret is the problem. When the secret is broken, domestic violence is no power, and when you create a sisterhood around it. But anyway, this woman came to Knockout for 18 years, and it took her until one year we asked her to share. It took her 18 years to tell us she had been coming to Knockout all these years, knowing she was an abused woman. Her husband beat her, degraded her, and it took her 18 years to tell us.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
And that's the power of the shame, because there's a tremendous amount of shame, thinking, maybe it's something you did. You're embarrassed you're in that situation, because intellectually you should leave, but emotionally you're trapped. because
Right,
you're a victim.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, shame, again, a very important thing to focus on. I think shame comes up in many areas, in
Mhm.
that whether it's in the area of growing up in a home of alcoholism, abuse, mental illness. I had a mentally ill sister who had passed away back in the day. This is going, back to the late 70s, early 80s. People didn't talk about their problems. And it took me a very long time to be able to be, and it's the thrust of my work today is mental health. And
Mhm.
it's really her journey that got me to go on the path that I'm on today.
Mhm.
When I think back to how things were hidden, people didn't want to talk about abuse. They didn't want to talk about mental illness. They didn't want to talk about alcoholism and drug addiction, things that we've witnessed. And the healthiest thing we can do in the times that we're in right now is talk about this. We must
Absolutely.
raise awareness
Yeah,
of
yeah,
issues. Do you
yeah,
know?
yeah. I mean, that was the mission of Knockout. We raised funds for a number of shelters and programs to help victims, but the big event in DC was started to raise awareness, speak out about it. I can't tell you how many evenings there when women who come suddenly for the first time tell someone at the table, I'm abused too, or I was abused. So I mean, we've even had celebrities suddenly just want to get on the stage and share with everyone. Well, in fact, my mom was a victim of abuse, or literally it is an epidemic.
It really is, and the thing that's really interesting, I mean, when you're telling me about this woman who was a doctor in Washington, that one of the things that really amazed me when I researched more about it was that, yes, domestic violence can affect anyone. Okay. And
Yes.
that means well-educated, intelligent, smart, and successful people. It's easy to assume that only people who are less educated or come from a lower socioeconomic bracket are more likely to be victims, and that's not true at all based on what you're sharing. It's
Yeah.
people from all over, all
Doesn't
races.
matter, education, finances, ethnicity, where you're from, it doesn't matter. Domestic violence does not discriminate.
Right, exactly. But I think there's a likelihood for people out of pride, and perhaps people that would consider they have more to risk, the types of people that maybe hold high-end jobs or are very well educated or prominent, that they have more to risk by revealing, and people that don't maybe have as much to risk. That's why I think it's so important for everybody to know that that shame needs to be broken, no matter who you are
Mm-hmm.
and what you're doing.
Absolutely. Women need to speak out. I mean, yeah, awareness and speaking out. But
Yeah.
yeah.
No, it's so important, and that's why this is such an important organization, Jill, that Knockout Abuse is doing such great work. And going back to the young women, I just want to circle back to that for a minute. Because I would say the most vulnerable age where a woman might enter into an abusive, age creates wisdom. A woman who's older is probably less likely to enter into a relationship with an abusive man than a younger girl who's going to fall in love with a guy and is more vulnerable. She doesn't have the life skills, she doesn't have the skill sets. And if she hasn't been educated about domestic violence, I remember, I'm sure you could relate to this as a young girl, there was always that bad boy thing, that women would be drawn, or young girls would be drawn to the bad boy, that was some kind of sexy idea that women conjure up in their head, especially young women. Okay. So that if between the ages, let's say between 16 and 24 is a very vulnerable time, even though you said, and I agree with you, they should be educated younger. What type of educating is being done on high school campuses, college campuses, so that these young women become really educated?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think enough. I know there are organizations that have programs for pre-adolescent teens, and we have for years spoken about perhaps starting something to take to schools. So I can't. Oh, what was that?
I think that was on my end. Sorry.
Okay.
A computer notification. I tried to turn this off.
You know, as I'm looking at the culture today, I think our culture, if we just look at the culture here in America, sets women up in a really tricky situation. One of the issues that we never looked at before in terms of domestic violence and young kids is, for example, today, 1/3 of the internet use is pornography.
Right.
Now, 85% of the most watched pornography online now includes severe violence and degradation of women.
Oh.
This new, it is Me Too's biggest enemy. It is like this dark undercurrent that parents and women are not aware of. Now, so this content is now being fed to our kids' iPhones. It's being pushed by this the big porn distributors who are now partnered with tech companies. It's being targeted to your 10, 12-year-old kid. Mm-hmm. So by the time children get into a relationship or even start having sexual relationships, and even have sex ed, they have been fed this horrific violence toward women, where little boys think that strangling a girl during sex is what she wants, because the sleaziest guy you know has gotten into bed with your kid, basically, you know, in your phone.
Right.
So
right.
When we have this culture working against us,
right.
Now, so this whole generation of women today is fed this crap to them, which is, boys become victims too. So then they're fed this completely warped sexual roles, the completely warped gender roles, and then you can see these young girls start self-objectifying themselves on social media because that's what they have been fed. Most parents don't even know this. This is the biggest epidemic facing women today. And then these companies are also working to normalize this in the media. Like, how many of us women have not had to sit through endless movies with guys are the smart guys solving the world's problems, and there's naked girls on the stripper pole? They're normalizing this really imbalanced gender roles, and all of this makes it worse for women. All of this brings more victims of domestic violence, the younger and younger generations. So until we really take a look at our culture as a whole, this is going to continue.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that the objectifying of women has been going on for way too long. And I also, and it's also not just, you know, in trailers and movies and blockbusters, but it's also in product placement. It's become an advertising. I mean, this is a changed world, Jill, from when we were growing up. I mean, you know, it's shocking to me, and I know we're both parents, do you know? And when I think of that, this has become, you know, they talk about the coronavirus pandemic is becoming the new normal. Well, the new normal isn't just the pandemic. The new normal is a lot of the things that we're talking about today. There are things, I think this time is very important for us to look at all the things that are going on. It's not just, let's just focus on the pandemic. And we've got the Black Lives Movement. And today we're talking about you know, sexual and physical violence and abuse. We have to look at everything, and we have to look at what's behind all of this. What's perpetuating it? What's feeding the beast? It's feeding the beast.
Absolutely, because I've been working with domestic violence for 26 years now, and it's not until a couple of years ago I started feeling like it's like we're putting band-aids on women, we're helping them and putting band-aids, but where is the wound? Where is this coming from? And it's coming from our culture. If you're globally, 1 in 3 women globally is abused. 1 in 3. Now, would 1 in 3 women be abused if we lived in the matriarchy? Would they? I
Right.
don't think so. No
Yeah.
one would care. No
Right.
one would care.
Yes. Women, women
Countries,
around the world.
if you study countries around the world, the less equality in the country, the less rights women have, the fewer women in government, the higher the domestic violence cases in the country. You take countries like Somalia and Nigeria and Yemen. I mean, 80, 90, 100% of the women have been abused because they have no rights.
Tragically, they're abused in the most savage ways in which,
They have no basic human rights. 40% of the world's women live without basic human rights.
Absolutely.
When people start saying, oh, me too, it's becoming too much. Wait a minute, look around the world. 9-year-old girls are sold off to 60-year-old men as brides. I mean, it's happening. It's
that's another issue that's as prevalent as the pornography, and that's sex trafficking.
Absolutely.
That's
getting worse.
Yeah, that is a situation that is so horrific. I have friends that have personally been involved in different organizations. They themselves have almost been traumatized being a part of the organizations that are trying to stop these acts of evil. Do you know? I mean, when you go down the rabbit holes of what is going on, it's shocking, it's mind-boggling, and it's deeply disturbing.
Well, we are all responsible for one another. So we really have to create a culture that's good for us women, that we want to live in, not just what the patriarchy wants women to live in. What works for us as women? Because until we create that, we're not going to rid ourselves of domestic violence.
Right. And I think that's why speaking up about it, again, going back to breaking through the silence. I think actually we're at it's a very challenging time that we're in right now, but I think the level of transparency, because of the internet, because things are so visible, that things are known to us more than they've ever been known. So it's incumbent upon us to break through the information that we're getting and to do something about it. Do you know? This isn't stuff that's hidden anymore. This is out in the open for people to see and to know. And it's terrible and criminal for us not to act on these acts of violence, these criminal acts, these acts that are done to minors with sex trafficking. If we don't shine a light on these areas, we're in deep trouble.
Mm-hmm.
We really
no. Again, we have to really look at our culture. Another area that has been an offender for a long time is also when you look at and for example, the movie industry. Think about, so 85% of all the parts, screenwriters are men. So similar percentage are directors. So basically, we as women have been fed, and this doesn't mean men are bad. It's just we're all victims of these gender roles we've been assigned. So we're going to the movies and we're constantly watching a man being the leader and the woman being secondary. All of this plays into how we then, as women, allow ourselves to being treated. It's like being brainwashed from you're born with these gender roles, and where the woman has always been at a disadvantage.
You talked about that even for yourself. I was an actress for 10 years. You were a model. I said in your bio that you did that film about, what.
Oh, yeah.
I know as an actor, a former actress, and you as a former model, what those areas, what those fields really, what they message to women by a certain age.
We live in a world, particularly a Western world, and particularly America, where women have been objectified. We have found our value in how we look, stupidly, instead of our brains or what we can do and our ideas. And so actresses, models, whatever, you have just lived in that in a magnified way. So
Right.
it's,
Yes.
so you know what
Yes,
it,
yes, very much so. A lot has changed.
yeah. But
Time.
it's not changed far enough.
No, but it has a new set of problems. When I was an actress, and I was a classically trained actress, I had a Shakespeare background. I did it all. I took it very seriously. Those were the days where I remember you didn't even have shows that women were lawyers and women were doctors. This is the era of, this was the era of, it was, not to diminish or to put any of that down because it was relative to the times we're in, but that was the time of Charlie's Angels, that was the time where women, you were really more arm candy than you really were like a nuclear physicist.
Yeah.
And so
the dialogue was from a man's perspective all the time. So the women didn't even feel like, because what we're given is what we aspire to, from
Right.
such an early age, what we're given and what we're fed.
Right.
I think a lot. You're American, right? Did you grow up?
Yes.
Yeah.
I grew up in
I didn't know if you were Canadian.
No, not from Canada.
I don't know why I was thinking that. Yeah. So I grew up in Sweden and went to school there in the 70s and 80s. And in the 70s, Sweden became one of the first countries, or maybe the first country in the world, to make gender equality the cornerstone of society. So when I was raised, I never wore makeup. Men and women were raised as complete equals. We were told to have, you should have a career. Thinking about marriage was absurdity almost. It's not on your agenda. You were two-career household. If you went on a date, both people paid. Men didn't open doors. They didn't let you go out ahead of them. I don't think my entire teenage years anyone ever said, "Oh, you look pretty," And I used
to believe, Jill. That's very hard to believe.
Can I basically we were taught that you don't need a man to rescue you. You are strong enough to rescue yourself. And I cannot tell you how much I appreciate that, because that creates a whole different society. It creates a whole and I think that's coming here to America now, that we are equals. You don't need a man to rescue you. You can rescue yourself.
Right. Yes. No, it's fascinating. I didn't know that about Sweden. That's very progressive. Do you know?
Yeah.
The thing that concerns me, I think, for the younger generations right now, in that the way in which I experience, let's say something like dating or courting, if you will, the way in which my dating reality was as a young woman felt very normal and healthy to me. Today, with all the dating apps and all of the things that people are dependent on to meet, I have heard more stories from young women that has been really very distasteful, as far as the way in which, in even subtle ways, that women are already being objectified without them knowing it. And that women are already accepting the precedent that is being set by men who I think are in an advantaged position, frankly, that on the dating apps where you're swiping how many times a day, oh, she's beautiful, oh, she's beautiful, oh, she's more beautiful, that women are at the effect of what then puts them in a position of that the guy is in control. Now, with all due respect, I know there's some dating sites. I'm not an expert in dating sites, but that there are ones where the women picks the man. And I think that's great. Okay. But what concerns me is when I hear the stories of young women that I know, is that the way in which they're being treated, the expectations that these men have, the fact that a lot of these men are like, a bull in a china shop, or a kid in a candy store, more specifically, that they can pick and choose as they want. And it puts women, again, I think, in the position of being.
But wait, I don't really know how these apps work, but why can't a woman swipe and pick?
She can swipe too, but what I'm seeing is that first of all, things like Men just saying, and this is some of the stories that have been shared with me of women, that they just expect a woman, not that she can't drive to their place, but I think when you're initially meeting somebody, it's good to meet at a neutral place, rather than to go to your apartment or go to your home. There are many articles that parents have written today about their daughters, which they're a little bit more concerned about their daughters, where the guy doesn't even ring the doorbell anymore. He texts you to come out on the date. He's texting you that he's at the front in his car and telling you to come outside if a girl is living at home. I mean, there's so many presumptuous ways in which the whole dating dance, if you will, to me still puts women in a compromised position. And some of the things that the guys have said to these women, the women have to take their power back. And the young women today really need to learn that. They really need to own the fact that their self-esteem is intact and that they can't tolerate this kind of behavior.
Well, I think our generation, women and men, have done the younger generation a real disservice by allowing this, this violence, internet porn to run so rampant, having it in the movies, also the entire, like, throwing money on the whole Kardashian empire, not to slam them, except what they stand for, this complete self objectification and sexualization, selling that, because then that has become the norm. So young women today are completely, feel like, they have to objectify themselves. And as long as we as women continue to objectify ourselves and find our value with men that way, we're going to stay forever trapped. We have to bring out who we are, our minds, our humor, anything outside of deriving value from the way we look, because it is a trap. I believe the objectified woman is the problem for all domestic violence. Mm-hmm. Because our values since the beginning of history, if you go back to 1800s, women couldn't work. So they had to look good so a man would give them their approval.
Right.
Because women couldn't work. So they had to find a man who thought they were pretty enough and they could marry. So since the beginning of history, it's like in our DNA, there are values from how we look, and it's keeping women in a trap. You can't ever set yourself free as long as you sell yourself that way. And that's what I mean, from what you're saying too on these dating apps, it's again, and I know
I'm seeing things that are being perpetuated that are really, disturbing. And one of the things, with my book, Live True, which is a mindfulness book on authenticity, and I teach that to young women actually as well. And to have them understand what it means to be authentic. And to be able to feel the difference of when you're being inauthentic and when you're being authentic, which means true to the core essence of who you are. This isn't just about the way you look. This is about your soul, okay? So for a lot of people, being inauthentic means they have to please somebody else, to be something they think you want me to be, so that you will love me and accept me. And that's why the work for me around authenticity and the authentic self as a woman or a man is how many people are really living inauthentic lives for the very reason that they feel they have to satisfy someone else.
Social media is, it's the best and it's the worst. It's all this pressure, and it's all this mimicking of behavior, and it's all this constant comparison with people only showing the best part of themselves. So I think it's easy to fall in the inauthenticity trap.
It is, and I think that, but what I am also seeing, to give the young generation or the millennials some credit, I am seeing a lot of them who are speaking up more about it, in as much as you talk about, we know these celebrities who are promoting things like doing Botox at 25 years old, or whatever they're doing, or plumping up their lips to look like a doll, I don't know, at a very young age. So that's setting a precedent that this is the way young women are supposed to look, is that women that are really going against that and not buying into that program are standing up for themselves. And they're saying, I don't want to get breast implants. I don't want to do Botox at 25 years old. I don't want to do these things. So I am hearing more of that coming up. And I think more of that awareness, again, in all the areas that we're speaking about today. And what that really says is it's advocating for yourself.
You have to please yourself, not everybody else. And you don't have to please. And then when I say the patriarchy, it's not against men. It's just the paradigm we've been living in. You want to please the patriarchy. I keep going back to lately, just drawing the comparison to Sweden and to America. I'm thinking like here in America, when women turn 50, you hide. No one wants to tell anyone, or 40 or 60 or whatever age, even 30. In Sweden, when women turn 50, they throw huge parties. They tell everybody, I'm 50.
That is so.
Now, isn't that refreshing?
Okay,
I'm going away.
I'm moving to Sweden. Okay. Yeah. Forget this. I am moving to Sweden. That is amazing.
Why do you advertise that? I've been Americanized.
Women are taught, certainly, and I remember being aware of that again as an actress, very cognizant of your age. You shouldn't tell people your age.
Oh my God, you lie about your age. It's like, that's because we've been sold this crap, and what I try to tell myself, and I'm why I'm starting the new feminist podcast, because to talk about more women's issues, because I feel like we have been blinded by our culture. So I say, forget everything your culture told you about being a woman, and then go ahead with your day, because it's so confusing. And that's why it's hard to be authentic, because it's so confusing when we've been sold this story. Even like here, we're gonna go on Zoom. You're like, oh my God, do I have lines on my face?
Is the lighting good?
And I'm a feminist, but I lie about my age. What? No, I don't really, but I don't, what I mean?
We're aware. Listen, we're human. We're aware of it. We're women. We want to look good, but what price are we willing to pay? Do you know what I mean? You have to draw a line in the sand. You have to ask yourself, and that's going back to the authentic self. I have to wake up and say, what am I comfortable with? What am I willing to do, and what am I willing not to do? What am I willing to do to preserve myself? Because I do value myself, mind, body, and spirit.
Yeah.
And what am I willing not to give up and not willing to compromise? That's checking with your authentic self for me personally. With the younger generation, they're too at the effect of so many things that they are confused. They're like, well, I'm this, but I'm supposed to be this. Well, if I do this, then I won't be accepted here. And again, that comes with age. You earn your wisdom with age, and you want to value that. Do you know?
Think about this. I'm thinking about when I went to school, or when we went to school, you only would compare yourself with your friends, the people in your town, or your school. You had a very small circle that you were around. Now, every person compare themselves to the rest of the world that age, because everyone's on social media.
Right,
so always
exactly.
You feel you're not good enough, you're not this, oh, but look at that one, that person is better than me. I mean, I don't know, we don't know enough yet what's going to happen to the kids who were raised with Instagram and Snapchat and this that whole like selfie obsession and
being
on the self. I don't know where this is going to end up.
We don't know, and we don't know a generation that's evaluating themselves about their worth based on how many followers they have. Do you know? I mean, this is very concerning, and I think it takes a person, no matter what age they are, to really advocate for themselves, to stand up for themselves, even though there's a lot of pressure to adhere to these types of pressures, these external pressures that are out there. I really think it's so important for young people today to fight for the authentic self, to fight for who they are. And there are people that are more comfortable doing it, and there are people that are struggling with it. And hopefully with conversations like this, or organizations, me writing a book on authenticity, you with your organization, Knock Out Abuse, that we can shine a light on things that can help people really own who they are, own who they are, even at times of difficulty, own who they are, even if they have to break through the silence of shame with abuse. I'm a big fan of the sisterhood, just as you are, Jill. And I think it's really incumbent upon us as women to be outspoken about these issues, to really speak up about the very things that many women are inclined to hide about themselves.
Yeah. And I think too, I mean, now, because where I'm thinking, would I do this if we lived in the matriarchy? I mean, ask yourself that question, just for the simple sense of, we're so used to growing up where really it's been a man's world. I mean, that's the truth. It's not negative toward men. It's just the way it's been, and it's shifting now. It's shifting. And the more it shifts, I think we're going to see women starting to feel different about themselves, and women stepping into more fully who they are.
Yes, I
believe so. Yeah,
I do, but I also really believe that it's also important for men to get more educated.
Men, we're in this together, men and women.
It's important for men to become educated. It's important for men to show up in these areas to say, we don't need to hit them over the head with a frying pan.
Men have been victims too. Poor guys. The roles that these stupid gender roles we've thrown a guy. I've raised a son. My son is 19. I mean, and just to think, we if you even go back generations, men have been taught, oh, don't cry. What do you mean? Be a man. Don't cry. And men grow up, not being in touch with their feelings. So look, men have been victims too. So what I'm saying is we have to work together, men and women.
We do. We really
undo these veils of archaic gender roles, and really see how we can work together, each gender 100% fully in their truth and authenticity and power.
Right. Exactly. And I think that, as a mindfulness practitioner, I teach how to be present with total awareness. And in my book, I have something called Mindfulness Repair, which means that anybody at any given time can be rude, whether you're rude to your partner, be it a man rude to his woman, a woman rude to her man. We can each take turns where we're not present with each other, and we're not talking to each other with love and respect. And we need to catch ourselves when we are being disrespectful to one another. It's not just, yes, I don't want to just single out men and say only you are being disrespectful to women. Sometimes we leave the house and we don't look our partner in the eye. We don't say, I love you. And we don't say things that we wish we had. So it's raising awareness. I can't believe how fast the time has gone, Jill. We're almost out of time. So I want to start to wind down here. I wanted to, I know we talked about celebrities, and I think it was really good when Rihanna finally came out, when she was in her abusive situation with Chris Brown. That was terrible. I think if more people come out, more people speak up, whether you're a celebrity or not, it doesn't matter. I think it's crucially important right now. And what I want to really, as we start to wind down, I want to, talk about ways in which, for anybody who's out there listening today, and this has really shined a light on something for them, like maybe they are the person that was coming to your organization for 18 years, but didn't speak up, that they in fact were a victim of domestic abuse. For anybody who's listening out there today, any form of abuse, I want to say, whether it's verbal abuse, that you're like, oh, that's okay, where you're brushing it aside or you're in any kind of denial, whether it's physical abuse, which is taking it one step higher, whether it's something that someone that's listening to us today, Jill, they themselves are going through, or someone they know is going through. What do you recommend for them to do? How do they get in touch with
I hear my son walking outside. Sorry. Um,
And I also know that
if you
October,
have a
I know that October is National
domestic violence month.
What
Yeah.
do you suggest with the couple minutes that we have left? How can people get involved with knockout abuse? Let's start with that. And for someone, again, who's listening, who wants to know more, or in fact wants to get help, wants to get involved with the organization, let them know how they can do that.
I would say west.org. That's knockout abuse out here in Los Angeles. And look at the many ways you can be involved. Normally, not during Corona, we have a series of live events. We have a speaker series called Lived and Learn. We have an event in the fall. Because of the coronavirus, we have now shifted gears and we're developing some other programs that are not, event-based. So if, for example, you want to help victims of domestic violence, or you want to raise awareness, we have started a knockout collab program. So if you have a business, if you sell a service, if you have a website, really anything, you can create a partnership with us, and we'll promote your business to our following and our group of women, and a certain percentage, people will be given a code, and a certain percentage then become donated back to knockout abuse to help women in need. So this way, anyone with any business or any service, you can actually do your part in helping women in need. The other thing we're doing.
Oh, I'm getting an echo. If somebody wants to do that, what do they go on? What do they?
They go to knockoutabuseWest.org and go under the tab collabs, and you can send us an email. Okay. So that's, we are doing a whole bunch of that now coming out. That's been one of our approaches. The other thing that we're doing, which I'm very excited about and that feels incredibly meaningful, is we are right now in the process of making over Haven Hills office building, which is the oldest domestic violence shelter in Los Angeles. And we are creating therapy rooms and meeting rooms.
Oh, that's
right now we're doing the office spaces. In the fall, we start on an 8-apartment shelter to redo a 6-week emergency shelter. So we're going to create these, we're getting a series of interior designers together with the One Room Challenge, a big internet makeover craze. And we're getting all the furniture donated to redo, again, school for kids, emergency apartment housing, because it's so incredibly important that when you come to a shelter, that you don't, that it gives you hope, and you shouldn't be coming to a depressing space and then really feel like, wow, I have obliterated, and now you don't have we want to give inspiring spaces.
Oh, absolutely.
So if you are someone who work in contracting or painting, anything within that whole arena, you can also go on our website, and you'll find the tab and sign up and help.
Wonderful. Okay, that is so great. What amazing work you're doing, Jill, with knockout abuse. We're out of time. I want to thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you.
So wonderful having you here with us today. And for those of you who have been listening, again, whether you are yourself struggling with any type of domestic abuse or violence, or you know somebody who is, Jill has given you information as to how to reach out. There is help out there for you for sure. It's time to break the silence. So until next time, from my heart to yours.